Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight's episode, Xtreme TV, where we're talking about Twin Peaks, Season 1, Episode 4. I have Professor Pixel here with me, and we're going to be talking about where this Season 1 is actually going, because we're halfway through the 8 episodes after this one here. And I have to say, Pixel, my initial thoughts on this is what I would call a bit of a light episode. I certainly don't think it's a bad one. We still get like a new character involved. We get maybe a character, too, that we don't see too much of. But holy crap, I think the best way to describe this episode is the plot thickens even more. And I think the town of Twin Peaks really becomes its own character. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This episode felt a lot lighter than the others, but that's because it's bringing us back down to earth. The main star of the show is Laura Palmer again, but not in the best light, I suppose.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and go right through the beginning, linearly here speaking. The beginning, you've got Cooper. He's waking up. He's going to go have his breakfast, which he's loving. He's orgasmic about the town, the coffee, the Blackberry pie. I mean, everything he get his hands on, he's loving it. But Audrey's there waiting for him. And you can tell Audrey's just got the goo-goo eyes for him. There's this cute little jazzy music playing whenever Audrey's on. I always think that's kind of cool. I pop for that. It's like some people have certain themes, like Laura has hers, Audrey has hers. And obviously she's probably 18, I'm going to say. I'm just saying that for all intents and purposes. We don't know, but we know that I think she's a senior in high school, let's say, because she knew Laura. She might be a year after it, because Cooper basically allows Audrey to flirt with her. He kind of almost flirts back, but he's doing it in a way to get information from her. So he has her sit down during breakfast. She plays hard to get. They've got this great chemistry going back and forth. He has her write something down. He's looking at the note, and he's basically saying, hey, if you need to tell me something, it's okay. And they have, I think, a pretty good conversation here about what's going on. And again, it is all about Laura. And he's asking about One-Eyed Jacks, because that's something that we heard about. And I think she has a great answer here. And this is some of the little bits of the writing that I love. She goes, well, it's a place where men go and where women work. But of course, they can't really talk too much, because this is when, you've got the dream that he had at the end of the last episode that we saw that was pretty crazy coming in. And so you've got, the sheriff's coming in and wanting to see what the hell's going on too. So let's talk about the scene here a little bit. What was your take?
Well, no, I absolutely agree. I found that answer kind of her being a little
proper.
Yes. She didn't want to exactly say it, so she laughed it off a little and says, "Where women work." They do have an interesting chemistry together, and I'm a little disappointed it was cut short, but he was expected to meet Harry there at 7, and I think in the way he describes his dream, it lays out all the facts and clears up anything that was confusing about watching the dream, because it wasn't exactly the clearest scene in television.
Well, he does make a mention of being like 25 years or so in the future, and it's one of the good things, and it's a simple thing that you don't necessarily get it. Now, of course, a lot of shows, they'll say previously on, and then, the name of the show. So without really doing that here, it's basically like a 30-second spiel of what he was dreaming about. And I think that's a smart bit of way to include the writing without being completely obvious. So you can go, okay, this is what his dream is this what's going on? And, it's pretty simple. He says, hey, if we can break this code here, we can solve the crime and everything else. But we definitely get some more talk about the one-armed man and whatnot too. But meanwhile, there appears to be, they get called away because there appears to be some sort of confrontation, some sort of fight going on about Laura's body, for this funeral that they're getting ready to have in this episode. It's because Albert's there. He's being a jerk. The guy and him kind of getting a little bit of a scuffle. And this is where it gets a little silly, I think, because Albert lands on the body, and then Cooper's there, and he kind of gets angry at Albert and everything too. So it's not much going on here other than to show that Albert's a little bit of a jerk. Not much, I think, to me in this scene. What about you?
Yeah, no, there's not a lot to go over as for except the character Albert. But there was one interesting note. after Albert lands on the body and he gets off and he basically goes away, and then everybody leaves the room except Dale. Dale fixes Laura's arm because it was off of the table.
Yep.
I don't know if that's exactly enough to count as bend backwards, but we get more of a note on that later.
Right. So then we find ourselves with with her father, Leland, who's obviously going insane with his grief. This couple is just over the top. I think it's good that we're only getting him in small doses. He's watching the Invitation to Love, the soap opera that's on. Soap operas, I cannot express to you how insanely huge they were in the 70s and going into the 80s for daytime TV. Everybody knew about the wedding of Luke and Laura Palmer from General Hospital, and there's a couple others at the time, but I think now you don't quite have the same love for it, just because the way TV's changed over the years. And so it may seem like, well, why is this such a big deal? Or is this like some sort of inside gag? Well, I just think having a soap opera, because this is a soap opera show, there's a lot of dark stuff to it. It is a soap opera with some over the top stuff. I think it's like the running thing that we see, this invitation to love going on about it. But this one young woman shows up. It's her sister. It's or his niece, I guess, Leland's niece, and he's freaking out or whatever. She's like, "Oh, Uncle Leland," and she just sits there. She's there for the funeral. This is the first time we've seen his character, so we don't really know too much about her. But of course, she's the spitting image of Laura Palmer, except for she's a brunette, dark hair. It's played, of course, by the same character. So it's kind of freaked people out. Like, wait a minute, is she coming back from the dead? No, it's just another character with it too. So I don't know if this really has anything big about it. It's just one of those things where it's like, okay, here's another new character. Almost every episode, I think we've had a new character.
There's an interesting note in that, and I did think that it looks just like Laura Palmer. But if you watch the soap opera before, it introduces each character, and it makes note of a character or of two characters played by the same actress. Then afterwards,
a little bit.
Then afterwards, it goes into the father of the show saying, "My dearest daughter, you're reading this because I've decided to end it all tonight. You know my financial issues have placed me in this situation. Goodbye." And I was a little worried that Leland, by the end of this episode, was going to end up offing himself, but suffice to say that he ends up embarrassing himself.
Yeah, like right now, nothing too deep, nothing too dark. Like I said, it's a bit of a lighter episode, relatively speaking. But I guess the diner that they work at, Norma, and the other one that's having the affair with Bobby, I guess it's called the Double R. And we find out here that Norma, the attractive, maybe somewhat older lady, she's talking about her husband with this guy who's basically saying, hey, your husband's getting ready to get out of prison, blah, 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 checking up on stuff. So it's introducing the fact that she's married as well. So not only is she involved with a married man, she's also, of course, having an affair on her husband who isn't there. So whether that's right, wrong, whatever, it just shows that, yeah, I think every married couple, for the most part, seems to be having an affair. And I say that sexually. Of course, we haven't seen Josie. Well, Josie's going out with Truman, but she's kind of friends with Catherine's husband, which we'll talk about shortly. But I just think this puts Norma in a bit of a different light. She's not just a side character like the older female wisdom guide for the younger waitress that works there. Because she seems like a nice person and she seems like she has a good relationship, but this just means there's going to be more trouble. Your take?
Well, I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be his parole officer.
Yep.
Because he's saying that he's getting out soon. How do you fight off all these men? And I can't exactly remember her answer, but
because he was kind of creepy though. It's like he was hitting on her, like he was wanting to have relations with her, and seeing if she would be up for it. And I'm like, if it almost was implied that if she had relations with him, maybe he could get out earlier or something. He had that creepy vibe the way he was looking at her. I went back and rewatched the scene and said, okay, I don't guess this guy's going to show up anymore, but he's given off enough of a creeper vibe, and Norma seemed like she's handling it very well.
You know, I didn't get it, but that makes absolute sense with her answer. Because she says that I let him know that I have a murderous husband in jail. No,
Yeah,
I really think that it just builds on her character a little more, which she hasn't gotten a lot of built upon, because it's mainly been Ed who's been starring in their little tryst. Are you there?
Yeah, so I was going to say, take us through this next scene here, because this is where we've been talking about. Leo's a bad dude, right? So we know that there's drugs being run. We know Bobby, and I think it's Mike's involved in it. They're part of a gang. And then you've got this other group that looks like we're going to talk more about, but of course they get fleshed out more in this episode. But this is the big confrontation between Cooper and Leo, which we know is going to happen at some point. So what was your take on this? Walk us through it.
Well, it starts out with Leo cutting wood, which I don't think this guy should ever have any sharp objects near him ever. But when Coop and Harry enter the scene, the first thing Leo does is he looks at the guy and says, "Who the hell is this?" And he introduces him, and Cooper basically asks him a series of questions. And the only thing that I truly noticed about the answers, it was just little information that we don't know if it's true yet. Leo was apparently on the road the night Laura was killed. We know that Laura was involved with Leo. We don't know how exactly. We know it's drug related, at least.
Right.
But if this is true, then though he is involved in Laura's demise, he's not directly involved.
Yeah, I just think this is a scene where they're basically saying, okay, we're going to give Leo some screen time, because he does give off a great, creepy, but yet smart and intelligent evilness about him, which is delicious, because right now, to me, he looks like the prime suspect in terms of the fact that he's like the darkest guy there. So we'll see what happens with that. But his wife, Shelley, that's her name. That's the one that works at, I guess, the double R with Norma. I'm going, okay, well, it makes you wonder if Shelley's in on it or not, or what, because she's casually having an affair with the football captain, even though Leo's a bad dude. And everybody seems to know what's going on, at least somehow, with Laura, and they all know she's involved in bad stuff, yet nobody seems to really let it bother them. And that's one of the things I can't figure out about Shelley or Norma, for example. Maybe they're just being ladies, ignoring stuff the men in her life are doing. Don't really know. And then hell, Norma's married to a bad dude, allegedly, anyway. But we don't know enough. We're just getting hints. So it's not like it's, I don't know. We're not done with Leo, I don't think, at this point.
The interesting scene is actually the next one. And
okay.
Because Bobby's dad, we haven't seen a lot of him. We've seen him one other time. He basically goes over to Bobby, who's sitting at the dining room table, and tells him to put that out, because he was smoking. And he goes on this long thing about how it's okay to be afraid. And Bobby looks at him and says, "Afraid? Afraid?" And all I can think of was the last time we saw him, his dad, if I remember correctly, he just hit him across the head during dinner. Honestly, yeah.
A little old school discipline.
I was waiting for him to do it again, because with how Bobby was behaving, it was unacceptable. Jeez. I don't understand exactly what causes a person to act like that. But it's not grief. We know that. Bobby doesn't care about Laura. Not really. There's a scene that's coming up that we can talk more about Bobby, and maybe some grief, but not yet. And at this moment, he's just acting like a little bitch.
Well, I don't know if Bobby's spoiled or not or what. I do think this is a pretty interesting scene. I gotta say, I really like his father. I think this is unexplored territory. I don't know how much he's gonna factor into things, but he represents old school fatherly discipline. And right now, you're getting the, I'm gonna ignore my daughter kind of scene from Leland because that he feels extreme guilt. It seems like. So where do we have it? Well, here we have old school discipline because he's legitimately involved in the military, really high up too, based off of the way he talks, the way he sees life, the way he's dressed, and so we'll see how that goes because basically his son's a bum, and I think he's not going to like that. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I'm interested to see if his father's got any bad stuff about him too. So I've been telling you about how the one-armed man that's been described by Hawk and how they saw the one-armed guy going in the elevator and Hawk lost him. Even though Hawk's a really good tracker, allegedly, according to Cooper, or according to not Cooper, but Truman.
Harry.
Yeah. Yep, Harry Truman. I just think Truman because of the president. But they're talking about it, and they go over with Albert about the tests he was doing because that's what he was called in to do on Laura's body. And of course, Albert basically tries to be a jerk, saying, "Hey, the guy hit me. Here's my report. I expect you to fill it." And he's like, "No." So he owns Albert's butt. He's keeping him straight line. He's enacting his own discipline. To me, the Albert things is what it is. Again, Miguel Ferrer, it's a great delivery. It's a little quirky. I think it takes away from the fact that we're really talking about it's confirmed. In case we didn't know, Laura was coked up. He talks about being tied up 2 separate times, and he explains like how it is, and there's claw marks on her body, and there was a little piece of something he doesn't know yet. They're going to run, send off to the lab or whatever, plastic it looks like. So that's kind of, to me, yeah, it's like the only real dark thing to it. So it's not a really big scene, but it's what I don't know if I like in here is at the end. Of course, Cooper he takes the he dictates, of course, to Diane, on his device there about buying something in Twin Peaks because he's so smitten with it. I guess that's supposed to be cute and funny. I don't know. So to me, while I was interested in the scene, I sometimes most of the time where we have these contrasts, it works for me. For here, it didn't. What's your take?
Well, there's an important note. They talk about the twine that was used to the twine fibers that they found on her that was used to tie her up. And Rosenfeld basically says that she was tied up twice before she was killed. And he shows the way that she was tied up. And he basically has his arms on either side. His arms are bent back, and Cooper pretty much says, "Sometimes my arms bent back." And the dream's obviously very
trippy and unreliable, but that's how he works.
And it gives some information. I'm not when the start of this episode, he tells pretty much Harry that if they figure out his dream, if they put the pieces of his dream together, they'll find the killer because he can't remember the name that Laura whispered to him. And right now, I'm not sure how this information is coming into play, but it's an important note. And about the note to Diane, I guess it was supposed to be kind of a quirky, cute scene, but I thought there was something a little more behind it. A piece of property at a very reasonable rate.
He's definitely attracted to Twin Peaks.
But then the funeral calls the sheriff away, and that's when I'm really glad that Dale did pretty much own Albert. He tells him, I could make a report and put you in a government office so low you never see the sun again. And Albert pretty much just huffs and walks away after some quick remark. But I imagine we won't be seeing much more of Albert. it sounds like after today, he's pretty much gone.
That's what it seems like. Yeah, so we get like a little quick scene. We'll just go through. Ed's just checking stuff out at his home. Nadine comes in. She's really like a different person. And, they embrace and she's talking about what it's like. And, again, we made before the comment about how, or at least I did, how Nadine's dress was very dated, very older looking, but she had, reasonably attractive middle-aged body, and she was working out, had that super strong moment. Don't know if that's anything other than she broke it because she was pissed. But the way she's talking to him, the impression is they made sweet, sweet love to the middle of the night, and then Ed's eyes get kind of big, like, uh-oh, I was a little too good or something like that. How am I going to get my way out of this? But he also seems like he's now going, yeah, I do love her, but even though I'm banging her on the side. So he's got that conflicted kind of thing to it. But then James comes in, he's a punk, saying he's not going to this funeral. And nothing to this scene or even the next one, even though the next one takes a little longer. You get a little bit of Audrey playing detective. There's this little secret passage in this big place, in her home there. She's looking at her brother. It's got Dr. Jacoby there, and he's the one that we've said had the second half of the thing, but we haven't really, nobody's gone to him yet, so we've been waiting on that for a few episodes. So there's stuff here that we're going, okay, you need to get on this. And I think this episode, again, the big thing was getting on to Lear or whatever. But then we get to the scene that, again, back in the day when I watched this, people talked about this was what happened in this episode. It was the funeral scene, because you get most everybody standing there, just kind of whatever. Cooper's looking around. I won't say it's overly double entendre, the stuff that the Reverend's reading out of scriptures and all that. But of course, the intellectually challenged one, the Laura's tutoring Johnny, the Audrey's brother, the older one in third grade with the Indian headdress. He's like, amen, amen, and everybody's getting kind of whatever. But here's the thing with Bobby. You mentioned earlier, and this is where I'm a little conflicted with Bobby, like, him and his father obviously don't have a good relationship. It seems like his father does seem like he loves him. He's got tough love for him. But Bobby here, in a way, kind of comes across as sincere. He's like, we all killed her. Everyone here's a hypocrite. We all blah, blah, blah. And of course, he's not pointing anybody out. But then, of course, James does show up at the last second. And he's like, you're a dead man. And he point at each other. And then it kind of jumps the shark with Leland kind of losing it, jumping on Laura's coffin, and the crane breaks it. It's going up and down. It's just, it's
thing
obscene.
Is going haywire.
Really, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, in this scene, when Billy shouted it, I knew something was going to go down. He goes up, and he does say that you all knew she was in trouble, but you didn't help her. You want to know who killed Laura? This town killed Laura. I really, there's something about it that bothers me, especially with his initial reactions. If
like
anybody knew
coffee or something, yeah,
too much of that damn fine coffee. If he of all people knew she was in trouble, but he didn't care. So I guess that he could be feeling some kind of guilt right now, and so he's projecting upon the entire town, ruining the funeral pretty much. But after they break up the fight, he was her first
boyfriend, so it's like I wonder if he feels a little guilty, like, or maybe part of him's pissed because he's like, well, screw you, you were in trouble. Maybe that's why they weren't together anymore. I don't know. I mean, he's doing a bad thing, but I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to say about Bobby to me right now.
Once Bobby and James are pulled apart, you're right. Leland does jump on the casket, and there's somebody in the back saying, "This thing's going haywire, man!" And we see him go up and down, and we're just staring as Sarah above is saying, "Don't ruin this too! Don't ruin this too!"
Yeah, and of course it's hard not to read a lot of extra meaning into what everybody says because we're starting to focus on every little thing in this hyper focused manner, and it's like, well, what do we know that he ruined for her? That she holds him guilty for. Maybe she feels he's responsible. I don't know. I mean, usually you look to the family first when somebody dies. That's just in reality. But this is TV, so who knows? The next scene to me, I think is like, to me, this next scene is the most interesting of this particular episode to me. It may not be the most memorable, but it's the most interesting to me in terms of what happens and the people involved. This is when you get this meeting, and it's called the Book House, and that's the name of the group that seems to be for the townies, not for the druggies, not the biker gang. But it turns out James is a part of it, which we knew because him and Ed had been a part of it. And then there's this other guy there that we don't really know, some no-name character. But they've basically kidnapped, bound, and gagged somebody, a guy named Bernard Renault, who is Jacques Renault's, I guess, brother. So they're trying to basically dig up information, find this guy Jacques who's involved with the One-Eyed Jacks, because they haven't been there yet. But they talk about how, like, there's a secret society. We've been doing this for like 20 years. It's kind of left. Cooper seems really not eager to accept it, but just like, yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah, no worries. Hey, I'm an FBI agent. I don't care that you guys kidnap somebody on your own. Cooper seems not like he's on the side of the town, but he's on the side of, there's something bad happened here. So it almost seems like it's good guys versus bad guys. So I found this really interesting to me here too. So it implies, of course, that the drug runners are a bad, team, if you will.
Well, just a couple of notes. Whenever Cooper is first entering the scene, we hear Ed lean over to Harry, and he's like, we can't trust him. He's not one of us. And
that's right.
That's obviously talking about Dale. But once Cooper goes in and Harry starts explaining things, it was a little it's interesting, yes. It's also a little kooky. We're the Bookhouse Boys, and they have a little eye itch that their finger trails down the side of their face.
Yeah, that's their little secret symbol.
It almost feels like they made it up in the last few minutes to get this information out of Bernard to me, but that's, I suppose, debatable. We this is the first time we're hearing anything about this secret meeting at the book house where the coffee is free. Where Bernard, he gives basically nothing. The actual next scene is interesting because what we're seeing, I guess, Jacques walk down the side of the road, and he sees the red light. I don't remember the exact term for the light, but this red light at the roadhouse that's blinking. And Jacques basically goes and he calls Leo and says that Bernard is in trouble. So when they went to grab when they went to go grab Bernard, obviously they didn't grab him quick enough because he lit a signal before he was taken away, because he works there as a waiter, I believe.
Yep. Or Bart. Well, he's janitor, whatever. He's a schlub there. Yeah. Bernard is.
Yeah. It's obviously a front, so.
I didn't mention Jack before because Jack was a bartender, and that's when they went. They had gotten into a fight, and then we found out later one reason why Ed fell down so quick with the fights is because they had drugged him. They slipped him a Mickey, because there's the Roadhouse, and then there's the Double R Diner, and then there's, of course, the Book House. So those are the three main locations that we're seeing a little bit. We've seen the diner the most, the ladies' hangout places, like I like to call it, the town's place. And then you got the good guys with the Book House and the bad guys with the Roadhouse here. So yeah, but yeah, Leo seems like he's in charge, doesn't he?
Yeah, Leo absolutely seems in charge of the operation. And whenever they're talking about the secret society, the Bookhouse Boys, they say that there's this darkness that always surrounds Twin Peaks. And obviously somebody is bringing drugs into town. But this isn't an operation that's been going on for 30 years, or however long they said they've had this secret society, and how long the secret society will go. And there's nothing about this, anyway, with Leo that seems dark in an odd way. It's pretty common. It's just drugs. And they're talking about it like there's some secret coven out in the woods. But there's one more note about the scene that I mentioned. Leo is leaving to, I guess, go see Jacques. Because
He's going to go pick him up.
Bernard.
Yeah.
And Shelley, the wife, once Leo's gone, she pulls out a gun and hides it in like a, I don't remember exactly what. I remember she pulled off a panel, stuck the gun in there, and just covered it back up.
Well, she covered up with the bloody shirt that she's been hiding that was Leo's.
Oh, yes. You're absolutely right. So she has some protection. That's the best part about this scene, that finally she's got something good going for her. The next scene is, it keeps switching for a moment there. I'm trying to remember between what, but Josie and Harry. Now I remember. Yeah. Josie and Harry are having a moment, and I don't exactly know how long after the Bookhouse Boys scene this is supposed to be taking.
Later that night, I think.
Yeah, it was just such a sudden jump that it felt disconnected, because while this show does take us throughout a day, usually there are better indicators that it's just suddenly switching. I don't know if right after where they left it with Bernard felt like a good place for Harry's side of things, and if he had to dip out early while Dale was basically getting information from Bernard, I feel like that could have helped, but it's whatever. Josie's basically telling Harry the whole situation, the double books. She thinks that something horrible is going to happen because Catherine and Benjamin want her gone. But we know, as she's giving information, Catherine is listening in the entire time. And she's not able to once they leave the room, but the books, there were 2 books with different sets of numbers in the safe. But now there was only one. So Catherine knew that Josie went and saw it. And I'm pretty sure Pete comes in at one point and asks, hey, where's my tackle box? And she says, next time you and that... and Josie want information, try to be a little better about it. As she is after she hid the second book.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, because we know her and Benjamin are screwing around. They're trying to take it. We know Josie's the sad sack who lost her husband. She's pretty. She's Asian, whatever. And yeah, we get that Truman's with her and all that. Well, this whole angle is doing absolutely nothing for me in the Sawmill. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really care. I mean, maybe there's something I'm missing, but I'm looking at this going, yeah, it's filler to me. Pete, who I thought, he's likable, but he's almost likable or it's annoying because he's like a nice guy because he puts up with Catherine's crap, and he's done that their entire marriage. It seems like she just owns him, and she like doesn't have any respect for him at all. That much is clear. You can tell she's ruthless. She's very much like how Benjamin is. They're plotting and scheming. So they're like the evil power couple, but I don't know that it has anything to do with the drugs they're being run. But you always go, well, where are the drugs coming from? The source of money. But oh, hey, wait, there's something from across the in Canada, across the border there. So maybe it's related somehow. We'll see. But I just go, well, Pete seemed like, okay, just a normal townsman who, found the body originally. We only seen him once or twice, but he's such a damn whipping boy. Like, I really want Catherine to get it bad, but we don't see her enough where she really pisses me off. And then Josie, again, she's just playing that one character that I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. I mean, so we know that Catherine knows what Josie knows, There's
just one more note. Josie is with Harry and says that she thinks wants the land. They don't care about the mill. They want to tear it down, give it to Benjamin, and that she asks, "Do you think they will kill me for it?" And Harry promises nothing will happen and kisses her. And I just want to get that out of the way because the next two scenes actually have more interest to me. You're absolutely right. The whole thing with Mill, there's something to it. Laura was obviously connected to Josie, but I see no connection between Benjamin Horne and Catherine to Laura. So it's just a side story, almost like for the sake of it.
For now, we don't know. Yeah,
it could connect later on, which is why it's important to note it. The next scene, Dale is in the graveyard, and he's watching as somebody goes up, and he's wearing this big coat. So for half a second there, I thought that maybe it could be the one-armed man that hasn't been seen at all this entire day.
Or perhaps it's the dark figure that we saw for a split second when Bobby was getting drugs from Leo. Allegedly.
Yeah. But soon he like pulls it out and he pulls out flowers and we see he has two arms. That's an important note.
It is.
And it's Dr. Jacoby. Dale walks up and he doesn't actually have to say a lot before Jacoby starts saying that I wasn't at the funeral. I'm a terrible person and I pretend that I'm not. I smile and act all friendly, try to laugh things off, but he doesn't really care about people. But Laura made him care in hopes she understands and can forgive him for not coming to the funeral. That's pretty much how it ends. Dale doesn't press any further, as clearly he sees that this man is troubled. But the next scene, the last one of this episode, Dale's asking, I believe it's Deputy Hawk, if he believes in the soul. And he starts giving a whole spiel about, I believe in many souls.
Yeah.
And while this is going on, we're watching Leland dancing in the lodge. And he's dancing alone until a point comes where he's asking people around, will you dance with me? Please dance with me. Won't anybody dance with me? He gets on his knees, sobbing. Dale and Hawk go to him, and they say they'll take him home. And the last thing we see is this red streetlight. And I forgot to mention it earlier because I forgot exactly where it was placed. There was a scene. It was late at night, and it was just this basically crossroads.
Yep.
And the streetlights were pretty much all red. It was a long, silent moment, and I tried to make something out of it, but I really just think it was there to add that vibe because I think it was around the scene that the Bookhouse Boys were explained. So it was trying to give an air to the moment.
Yeah, it's a little atmosphere shot, I think. Back in the day, in some smaller towns, the way lights were, they would just all turn red or blink, when they wouldn't be in service or whatever for a bit. And I don't know that it's really implying that, but I think it's just the whole passage going from green, which is good, to red, which is, I think, the direction we've seen in all these camera shots, because we've seen it now ever since Truman and Cooper were in the car and they were having a conversation. Cooper was whittling what would turn out to be his little flute that he makes. So I think the first time we saw it, but I think we've seen it every episode since then. So it's a nice little transition shot. It does add to it, I think. I don't know why, but it does. I don't have a problem with that, but this is more of I think the meat and potatoes of the philosophical argument about what's going on. Because here we have, of course, in the Twin Peaks reality, the two different factions that we know of, the Bookhouse Boys, and then I'm going to call it the drug cartel, because I don't know if we really have a name for it. And we still know that the whole One-Eyed Jacks is the thing that we've heard about early on that we haven't been to yet, other than the one brief scene where we've seen some of the other couples go there, but we haven't seen Cooper do it yet, right? So to me, I look at this, and you've got the conversation with Hawk talking about, different way of looking at the soul. We've heard about the Tibetan rock tossing method, and of course, as well as Cooper's dreams for how he gets stuff. So there's definitely an element of mysticism here, and I think the most telling thing to me is that steps out, because it sounds so far-fetched that if you said in real life you'd get laughed at, but that fits in with here, but it's completely glossed over. And it's when they mentioned, hey, we've been protecting this town for 30 years plus. We've been meeting here for 20. We've been doing this going on for a while, and the only thing I wrote down on my notes that I'm looking at right now that I didn't really get out was a particular scene in during the funeral. And I thought I saw her at a diner in an early episode and missed that as well. But there is somebody that's called the log lady that they refer to, that she hasn't been involved. And they do it enough where you see her in a frame, like at the funeral, there's a scene and she's just standing there holding her log, which is really bizarre and weird, right? But she's obviously a kooky person that they're showing that I assume that we'll get to, but that hasn't even been touched yet. So to wrap it up, I would say, a very light episode. It's not as intense as the other ones, which isn't a bad thing. It's the pivot point between this first season. We, of course, have been getting new characters every day. Some we haven't seen as much of. Some we expect to see some more, as well as some locations. So like I say, there's a lot of meat and potatoes, but I think thin is a bad way to describe it, but I think it's accurate in that it allows us to go, okay, this is 4 episodes in. I can kind of catch up understanding what the hell's going on and who's who a little bit, because there's not that much really going on in this episode. We just see a tiny little advancement of some of the relationships. So not too much new, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This episode didn't have a lot of the investigation, even though we had a lot of confrontation with Albert. There wasn't, other than the exact details of the autopsy that he performed, even though he wanted to perform more tests, there wasn't a lot of information going towards Laura's death. It was an episode to bring everybody together for the funeral, to get their exact feelings beforehand and during and after. I think the introduction of the Bookhouse Boys was an attempt to bring something into the show, to make it like small towns, there's something. But I thought it came off a little, out of all the scenes, like it was a little goofy. I hope that they have something to further explain it down the road. But overall, you're absolutely right. This episode is a lot thinner plot-wise, but in characters, it absolutely has notes that it's important to touch on. I didn't even know Norma had a husband, for instance. And
right.
If he's coming out soon, that's obviously going to come into play when it comes to Ed and, I guess, Nadine by extension of Ed. But I'm still enjoying the ride. It's definitely not an episode weak enough to make me say, oh, man, I'm not really feeling it. I'm still interested in the story. And I look forward to getting more information down the road.
Yeah, and I think that, like I say, in the first episode, we just get hit over the head with, dead body. It's of the person that's supposed to be the positive representation of, youth and virility, of just going forward. That's what most cultures value is the potential of, positivity going into the future, whether it's your offspring, something about a town, a characteristic about somebody, and it's all wrapped up in Homecoming Queen, who we find out's exactly not that, or maybe she's got a lot of sides to her. So take somebody that sometimes some people downplay as just being beautiful on the outside and ugly on the inside, or, absent on the inside, and really puts it on its head. And then, of course, like I say, the town gets introduced a bit more. So I think after this episode, I'm going like you. I'm looking forward to enjoying the ride, but we're not getting haymakers necessarily every episode, but it's intriguing enough where, depending on which plot line we seem to like at the time, we can really get into it, and we can get a chance to kind of catch up on some other ones, or some other ones can be put on pause, because there's a lot going on here. It can also be overwhelming. I think really to enjoy it, you have to be an active watcher. It's not just a simple thing to sit down and watch and just go, okay, what the hell's going on? Why do they have a lady holding a log? Well, I'm sure we'll find out. You're just not going to introduce it to not do something with it. So same thing with like Norma's husband or anybody else that we may have seen too much of or whatever. We're assuming that, of course, the quick scene, 2 episodes ago with Bobby getting drugs from Leo and them having their conversation at night in the woods, the figure we saw was there with Leo. We don't know that. Maybe it was the doctor. Maybe it was somebody else. Maybe it's somebody we don't know. But we just assumed that somehow maybe that guy was watching Leo and watching them like he's playing backup. But we don't know. All we heard was who's that, and pretty much that's it. So we don't know if Leo knows that person or not. I mean, we assume that, but there's enough in the show that's leaving it intentionally undiscovered, and I think that's a good thing too. So yeah, looking forward to talking about episode 5 next week on Xtreme TV. So for you, Professor Pixel, everybody here listening, I'd like to say thanks again. My name's Rob here on the Xtreme Movie Show. Check us out on some of these platforms. This is really blowing up, getting some interesting comments from people that just absolutely fantastically love this show, and it's definitely worth watching and definitely worth exploring, and we're going to be doing that again next week, episode 5. So for everybody here, thanks for listening. As always, have a good night. Take care.
And stay extreme.